Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the GMI Rocket Show. My name is Roman Zelichenko. I am your host. I am a former immigration lawyer and the founder of Laborless, an immigration tech startup that automates H-1B compliance, and also the founder of GMI Rocket, which brings you this show. And I'm super excited today. I feel like I always say that I'm super excited, but I genuinely am super excited every time. Our guest today, Xiao Wang, the CEO of Boundless. Boundless is an immigration tech company that essentially helps people with their permanent residency and citizenship process. It's hyper focused on the sort of family immigration side. They have been making really great moves and big news over the past few years. They've raised money, they've acquired a company, they've helped thousands and thousands of people come to the U.S. and become permanent residents and citizens, and they're really kind of part of this like massive movement to infuse more technology into the immigration industry. I'm really excited. I've had the pleasure of chatting with Xiao many times in the past, and we've been on a few panels together. I've never had a chance to actually like get to know the story behind the founder. And so, Xiao, thank you so much for being here and spending your time. And I'm excited to learn more about you and Boundless, of course.
I'm really happy to be here, Roman. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I feel like sometimes I like to start these things off with kind of what's your backstory and things like that. I hope for folks out there, it's great. You guys have been in the news multiple times, and I do hope I just want to share that the first time I heard of you, and I think I shared this recently on social media, or today rather, was on a podcast. I was listening to The Pitch by Gimlet Media. Love that podcast. So, here's a little plug for The Pitch. It's all sorts of industries. And I'm always just like, well, whatever, I'll learn about e-commerce startups. I'll learn about health tech and maybe get some insights about that I can apply to the immigration industry. And they were like, today's guest is, so-and-so talking about immigration tech. And I literally remember I was riding the bike because that's where I listen to my podcast. And I was like, wait, what? An immigration tech company, on the show is amazing. So it was, and since then I've just had the pleasure of following you and the team. So it's really cool to be here. I just love sharing that story because it was like, you don't hear that often, especially in such a mainstream show, right? But I think it shows how immigration is becoming more mainstream, how technology and immigration is sort of becoming something that everyone's talking about, not just us immigration nerds.
Yeah, I mean, although I do wish someone told me how hard it was when I started to actually get a company off the ground, especially over this last 4 years with everything that was going on, and to actually turn this into something that matters and something that can help tens of thousands of people. I'm glad that the pitch and Gimlet gave me that initial platform, but it's I'm sure, as everyone here knows, it's not easy to build up a business in this industry.
I feel like I hear that a lot. People are just like, the only way I kept moving forward is because I just didn't realize what I was getting myself into. It sounds like a lot of at least first time founders, and I'll put myself in that category. It's one of those things where you're just like, man, if I knew how hard this was going to be, I probably wouldn't do it, or I'd think twice for sure. But anyways, I want to jump into your story because, you are an immigrant yourself. Your family came to the U.S. Obviously, that's a part of your kind of the narrative, within Boundless to at least some extent. But I would love to hear a little bit about sort of what was that experience like for you, and what do you, how old were you when you came here? What do you remember from that time?
Yeah, so it was an interesting time. So I was born in China, and my whole family lives in one city in China, Nanjing, and the government was really very nervous about letting people out of the country. But at the same time, because China was trying to westernize, trying to modernize, they also wanted the learnings of people who could bring perspectives from outside the country. So they basically allowed certain people. So my parents ended up were graduate students, as well as working in a factory, and they let some people be able to try and make their way and try to learn these insights from other countries, but only one at a time. Right, so as to have an extra incentive for them to come back. So my mother was the first one to be able to leave the country. She went to Canada first to study at University of Toronto, and then ended up starting a PhD program at Arizona State University in Tempe. But my father and I stayed in China, and then a year after that, they let my father go to join my mother in Arizona. But I had to still stay back. And so it wasn't until I was 3.5, so another year and a half later, that I was allowed to actually rejoin and reunite with my family in Arizona.
Wow. Who were you living with family when your mother and father both came here?
Yeah, so I was living with my grandparents, as well as my aunts and uncles. And so I can only assume that I was sort of just rotated around different people at various points in the journey.
Do I'm one of those people, like there's some people who remember things from super young. I basically don't remember much before 5. Do you remember anything from that time? I mean, do you remember your life in China before you left, or like the process of sort of flying over to the US and just that whole thing? Do you remember any of it?
So I wonder if this is the same for you too. Is that like over time, other people tell you your memories, especially in that age. And so, and then with enough imagination, you can actually fill in the gaps. So it's a little bit unclear around like, which are real memories versus which are like just stories that I've heard over and over again. But I mean, a couple of things stick out. Right? So one is, getting picked up by my grandfather, like on his bicycle from my daycare. And he would always have like a banana or like some little treat. And there's like, I was always excited to try to find it. And then once I came to the US, I spent, so I landed in LAX, and it was the first time that I ever seen an escalator. And apparently, so this isn't a memory, but it's a story, like I literally spent as much time as you could just going up and down escalators because it's just like the craziest thing. Yeah. And then I spent a meaningful amount of time in a Kmart, because that was also the first time I've seen a toy store, and there's a great photo of me posing in one of those like plastic cars, because again, it's just everything was new to me. Or like the first time I tasted ice cream, it's apparently just an incredible experience and just blew my mind. So yeah, it was a definite interesting like immigrant journey as I started exploring these aspects of Western culture for the first time.
Yeah, I came here when I was 2.5. My family left the Ukraine when I was 2, and then we lived in Austria for about 6 months. And same thing. I mean, I've seen a couple of pictures, but mostly just stories that I've heard over and over again. And it's like, I'm not sure if I remember. I don't think I remember it, but but some part of me, especially now that I'm in the immigration space, I'm curious how you feel about this. I've talked to my parents about this on multiple occasions. I'm kind of like, I wish I don't wish, but I also do wish I remembered, especially because I'm in the industry now. I want to I feel so Americanized, even though I know I wasn't born here, obviously, and my family went through all this thing. All I really remember is like this relatively comfortable American life. And yeah, I don't know. I kind of wish I remembered a little bit of the hardship just for a bit of that like personal context. But, you talk to your parents, they're probably like, no, you just be happy with the fact that you don't remember kind of coming here and, not having a lot or what have you.
I mean, I think that I think there's this, first generation. I mean, I guess we're both sort of first generation, but not of like this mentality of grit and just perseverance through anything that comes along in a way, and that like whatever struggles that my parents had financially, it never like spilled over to me. And they would do whatever they needed to do to like help me have every opportunity that I wanted, no matter how much hardship that ended up adding to their plates. So it's something that I definitely appreciate, but I do agree with you in the sense of like of truly understanding and truly appreciating what what we're able to have.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it doesn't take, we can empathize and we hear these stories, but yeah, it's an interesting thing when you weren't born here, but also don't remember the whole journey beforehand. So it sounds like your mom was in grad school in Arizona. Is that where your dad met? Is that where you all kind of were living when you first came over here?
Yeah. So we gathered, in Arizona, and this is also where my parents ended up applying for and receiving their permanent residence. So that was our first like encounter with the immigration system. Is that my father's company wouldn't pay for any of the immigration expertise or legal help or to get our application together to be able to stay in this country. And so we ended up having to try to find an attorney on our own, which meant really just asking around the other Chinese community. My dad had another Chinese person at work who had a family member who used this specific attorney, and it was successful. And so basically for this virtual stranger, we handed over all the money that we had left or like didn't have to try to get us through this process successfully.
And how did it go?
So we were lucky in the sense that like it actually went well, right? Which is a story that you hear a lot about, and it really pains. Something that I am hoping that Boundless, as we get larger and larger, can really eliminate out of the system are new immigrants just getting taken advantage of by very unscrupulous players that basically prey on this lack of understanding, lack of the language barrier, like cultural barrier, etc. And and so we're lucky, and actually ended up finding a attorney that was able to do this successfully, and then over time, then I later helped my parents with their naturalization process. So with studying for the exams and answering all the questions and the language tests and all of and going through that journey, which is kind of really fun to experience.
That's something I remember too. And I remember my parents learning the Pledge of Allegiance, and I was so proud because, you kind of, it's drilled into your head as a kid here. And I was like, I know that. I can help you with that. That's so cool. And that kind of goes to the DIY side of it too. There are a lot of people who do go at it themselves. And of course, it sounds like your family was lucky. I mean, you kind of grew up here. Well, you did grow up here. So, your English is perfect, and you didn't have that, I'm assuming, level of difficulty that someone who basically just came here as an adult would have reading the forms and trying to and all that stuff. But yeah, like that's lucky that they had someone like you there. Otherwise they probably would have to go to someone else again and spend more money and, get the support of someone who hopefully they can trust. So you were growing up in Arizona. Because I want to get to when you went out to college. I know you studied at Stanford. Did your family live in California, or did you just go there for college?
Yeah, we ended up moving to outside of Seattle, which is, coincidentally, I think where I am today. It's so interesting how, you try to leave home or the area, and then at some point you get old enough, you're like, I miss that place. And so, grew up in, spent most of my later elementary school, middle school, high school up in Seattle, in this area, and then went down to California for school. I wanted a place that was that I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And what's nice about Stanford is that they offered something for everyone, and that you can have a full range of decisions around what you want to do, and you don't have to make decisions early. And so I didn't end up declaring my major until my junior year, which is also a luxury that's seldom afforded by colleges.
We'll get to this, but just very quickly, I'm curious, when you were younger, were you the kid that sold baseball cards and lemonade stands? Did you have that entrepreneurial streak within you, or were you just, studies and grades and moving to college and not having this desire of building your own thing even when you were younger?
It was something in between. So I think the table stakes was everything that a Chinese family in America needed to do growing up, right? Which is I had to get good grades, I had to be, do a lot of math, do a lot of science, play classical piano, like the standard set of portfolio of activities. But on the other side, like I was really lucky that my high school offered a marketing class, which is rare. And it was the first time because they got this teacher who came from industry and just wanted to teach high school. And that was the first time that I was exposed to the world of business. And I found it fascinating to like learn about the 4Ps, to try to understand how selling works. And so that took me to a journey where I worked in retail, and then later on in high school, I became like a 100% commission salesperson for vacuum cleaners, sewing machines, and microwaves, which I thought was like one of the most fun jobs I've had, because you could literally like, yes, I was at the Sears in Alderwood Mall. And you have specific hours and shifts, but in reality, since they weren't paying you anything, you can just decide what you wanted to do. And it was all about sort of how do I best understand people? How do I best understand our various products? How do I best understand the like combination of things that would give me the highest commissions? Right? Like it became a game around like, you can sell the same amount of sales, but you could actually take home meaningfully different amounts. Depends on what you sell. And so that was the first time I could actually, semi run my own shtick. And it was like an incredible learning opportunity for me.
That's so cool. It's not quite door-to-door sales because people are there, coming in and talking to you. But yeah, I mean, you have freedom over how active you want to be or passive you want to be. Do you remember anything in particular that you did during that time that like was like scary, that you just tried and worked, or maybe didn't work? I'm just curious, like if you took risks at that age, because it sounds like you had a realization that you have freedom. So like, what did you do with that freedom, even though you were a teenager, selling vacuum cleaners?
It was, there's different aspects to it that I thought was interesting. It was like, one is, I dug deep into our warranty policies and, realized that there is a gray area where like these expensive HEPA filters that you have to replace to keep the allergens away could be technically covered under the warranty. And so with that knowledge, I actually became one of the like top sort of warranty sales folks, because like otherwise it's like it's very hard to sell an extended warranty on household appliances, right? Like, and in reality, it didn't feel good sometimes, because it's like it's a lot of money for not that great of experience. But if you're like, actually, hey, this warranty kind of pays for itself if you like, if you have high allergy needs and like you need to replace this filter a lot, it became a much different sort of process. And so that was something that was not typical that I did that like paid off. Other things I learned was around like people. So like because it was 100% commission, it's always a little awkward, because I was there as this was my high school, like, hang out with friends job. Right? I didn't have to worry about rent. I didn't have to worry about food. But other people were there. This was their career. And because it was 100% commission, then every customer I was talking to is someone that someone else is not talking to. And although we had like go in order, like, we have this like, general gentleman's policy, if you will, of like, letting everyone have a shot at each, person. And then you get to talk to a similar number of people during the day. There were definitely times where, I felt really bad, because your sales numbers are public. And so then you get days where like someone has nothing, and it's like wildly frustrating on days where you just draw the short end of the straw with every like customer that you talk to. And so it was, I had to think and learn pretty early about I think two things that carry me forward. So one is that if I had a fantastic day, I feel great that day, but that doesn't actually mean that I'm like 5 times better than everyone else, or like I'm just like world class at selling vacuum cleaners. It's like I got really lucky that like the people that I drew when they walked in the door were people who were ready to buy or had a higher budget. And then if I had a terrible day, um, it's also a reason for you to like sort of not beat yourself up, that like that's not because you're worthless or like really bad at your job. It's just like there's a lot of factors that are outside of your control. And I think having that has meaningfully sort of helped me be more even keeled now, especially with a startup, where there are days where you feel like you're on top of the world, and then there are days where you feel like you are utterly failing at everything that you try to do.
Yeah.
And that no matter what happens, neither story is actually a true or complete one of like who you are.
That resonates so strongly. The roller coaster, the emotional roller coaster ride of running your own business, especially startup, especially in an industry like immigration, where things out of your control happen that can actually impact you, that can make you feel like you are on top of the world, and it has absolutely nothing to do with you. It can be a regulatory change or a policy change. Now that's super insightful and so interesting. Man, you should write a whole book about everything you learned selling, vacuum cleaners at 100% commission as a teenager, because there's so much there, to your point about being a professional, running a business, interpersonal relationships, sales tactics, also just the idea of digging into the policy and thinking about how you can sort of reframe the sales pitch with something that is already there, but is just not typically talked about. Super interesting. I want to let's skip ahead a little bit, because I want to obviously get to all the awesome stuff you're doing now. So you went to Stanford, you graduated, you had a number of cool jobs. I would love to dive into all of them in depth. We won't. But one of the things that I noticed was that you kind of did this thing where you jumped from like almost for-profit to like government, where you moved to New York City, right? And you worked on like an innovation lab, I read, in New York City, for the Department of Education, which, I went to high school. I went all the way through college, really public education in New York, but up to high school in the city. So I'd love to hear about maybe your experience there and sort of how you parlayed that into then going into private equity, which feels like the total opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah, the interesting thing is I do believe that that there is definite value, and there's sort of this, like on both sides of better understanding people and the way that things work on the other side between public sector and private sector. Because I think the natural inclination when you're a management consultant or private equity, you're like, oh, the government like is just wasteful money. They don't know what they're doing. And then like if you're in the government, it's like, oh, these people like don't understand how like utterly challenging it is, and to make massive scale change that they've never had to do, and they can just fail, whereas like we can't fail, because if we fail, then like all these kids' lives are ruined. And so I think that level of appreciation, I think, has been really helpful. For me, is at the time my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, was a teacher in the South Bronx. And the stories that like she told me of like the way that these kids' lives, and the way by the time they reached her middle school, there was, some people are just so far behind, and like the situations at their homes and all of these aspects was like utterly compelled me to like try to do something about it. And so I naively thought that like, oh yeah, like this seems like a solvable problem, and joined the Department of Education. This was under Mayor Bloomberg and Joel Klein, when at the time, like the education system was performing so poorly, especially for people of color and lower income, that the mayor just basically gave a tremendous amount of power to the chancellor to run the school system. And so what we ended up doing was like, look, if our schools were graduating 50% of, so kids were graduation rate at the time was about 50% from high school, and of those 50% go on to some sort of higher ed, and of those about 50% graduate from that some form of higher ed within 6 years. Like if you do that math, you're like failing 85+% of your students if the goal for gainful employment at the end was to have some semblance of a higher education degree, whether in trades or or liberal arts or engineering or whatever. And so in that lens, we were able to say, like, how do we rethink this, right? So, charter schools have tried doing different aspects of this. There's others, or private schools have also been able to change the rules a bit. But the public system, of which at the time was 1,600 schools, over 1 million students, had all of these rigorous boundaries around like what they could operate within. And so all these extremely well-meaning and hardworking people were sort of shackled to this like construct. And so what I was like help launch and build was like, okay, let's rethink that construct. Let's raise a bunch of private dollars that are unrestricted, and let's bring in people from all around the world who've tried different models and tried to see like what could work. So we use technology in different ways. We use time in different ways. We use space in different ways. Like all of these constraints that you originally had, like, does it have to be 9 months a year, right? Does it have to be from 7 a.m. to 3 a.m.? Does it have to be in these specific buildings? Does it have to be taught in like class sizes that are fixed? And we're just able to try and launch a whole bunch of different experiments, which is a scary thought, right? Because in now, like in the startup world, you launch experiment, it fails, that's great, that's learning, I get to learn something else, right? In here, you launch experiment, it doesn't work. It's like that is someone's like life that you have meaningfully affected in a negative way, which I think is also a reason why experiments aren't run very often. But also the flip side of that is that change and positive change doesn't really happen very often either. And so, I was able to actually, build out our first year. We ended up getting launched about 80 new schools that tried things in a different way, which is exciting. And then it grew to over 300. It's my first also exposure into like what happens with political like space, right? With de Blasio coming in, whole new set of initiatives, whole new set of priorities. And it was like that I couldn't really do and run with the aspects that I wanted to do and make this even bigger. The private equity side is really about picking up skills. So if you think of my career as like learning skills around how to build a company and how to build organizations, and then applying those to doing things that haven't been done before. The former was my time as a management consultant and in private equity around turning around companies. It was after the 2008 financial crisis where a lot of these companies just were struggling. So it's like, how can we help them get better? And then on the new sides, it's like we did this I did in public sector with Department of Education. I did in the private sector with Amazon when we launched and built and launched Amazon Go, which is the store where you just take something and you leave, and it just ruins shopping for me because you don't have to ever wait in line to like hand someone your money again. And then now with Boundless around like, hey, how can we rethink the family immigration process in a whole new way?
That's so fascinating. I'm curious, when you were moving from the public sector to the private. I know we skipped because you started off your career in management consulting at McKinsey, and then you went to the public sector to New York Department of Education. When you went over to the PE space, I'm just curious, what was this is almost unrelated, but what was the kind of pitch that you gave them of like, given what you've done in the past and you just built this new thing and, within Department of Education, how are you going to come in and help, this PE firm turn around massive organizations that are perhaps failing or whatever it is, and turn them into something that's got, cash flow or whatever it is. I'm totally curious because I think that the way that you paint this picture of who you are and what your vision is, ultimately does channel, like you said, into your leadership within Boundless. But maybe at that time, if you could remember, like, what was this sort of transition in your mind and how did you sell that to this firm?
I mean, one of the things, um, one of the like just bizarre situations that only happens with private equity and those constructs is that like you have a firm of people who are far more junior in their career, right, and haven't actually done real work or been in like real companies, going and buying companies that actually been around for a while, and then telling these seasoned, experienced management teams like how they should actually be operating their company. Right, the whole thing sounds absurd, and but I think what I learned, and it's the same thing in management consulting, right? Like as you're coming in, first job out of college, and you're like telling a CEO how they should be doing their job. But I think the combination of that, then, as I went into the public sector, one of the things that I like struggled with in the beginning was like, how do I build consensus? How do I bring all of these disparate folks that are affected by my decisions or what I want to do together onto my side so I can actually execute? And that was something that I had to learn in order to be effective at all. And I think that type of skill like really carries over into the private equity world to be effective as well. I mean, I think that one of the key learnings that I made is around like, you may end up seeing something that's not working, and you're like, this is a terrible like situation, or like this is a terrible idea or decision set. And if you're stuck there, then you're just like, you dismiss everyone who's involved, you dismiss the organizations, and you're like, okay, like they clearly don't know what they're doing. Let me like, I'm so much better than them, I can do it better. And instead, it's really that if you think that people actually do care, and in all these organizations, people definitely care. It's that like, oh, we're here because there was a long series of decisions, of which each time, maybe even the right decision was made. But then like, as they compounded over each other, we got to this place. Or like, and so it's like, if you then start thinking that, oh, well, there's a good reason why all of these situations happen. Now you can go and start rolling them back each step along the way and trying to say, okay, now which assumptions are fundamental that we should change, and not like, you people don't know what you're doing.
Right.
And I think that mindset shift of like really trying to start with that everyone cares, everyone has like the right intent, and due to any number of reasons that are in or outside of people's control, we've ended up here, makes it a lot more effective to like actually get to root causes of areas that can be fixed, that then change the whole chain afterwards.
And it probably gets people aligned, and enables them to actually implement a change much more effectively and successfully. Less pushback probably as well, if everyone feels like they're cared for and they feel like they're heard. And you come in as an outside person and you don't just like boss people around, you kind of really get on everyone's side. It's yes, as an outside consultant, it's one thing, but even internally it could feel that way. If some person from a new team comes into your team, it's almost like, whoa, hold up. Like, you can't just come run in here, and it creates friction, which then causes, people to have maybe the wrong intentions or not to implement things in the right or the most successful way. It's a super insightful, I think, takeaway. And I love how you connect that also with both the private and the public, because it's, you're right. I mean, you don't think that. You think it's like one world or the other, but there's truly a lot of learnings that can happen in both of them.
Yeah. I think to your last point, by the way, I do think it's super valuable to get fresh perspectives. And so that's why, like, across like teams, even my own team as I'm building it out, like every time you bring in someone new, it's wildly like valuable. And that was like first 6 months of like the like fresh perspective, Googling like, why are we doing it this way? And it's like, it's on me and the rest of the team to like encourage a place where that's safe to like say like, and the question, obviously respectfully, again, it's not the like, this is garbage, why, but like, that really does that really make sense? Like, is there a different way we could think of that? Why did we make that assumption? It is hugely valuable. And so that's like, that I think, by the way, is one area that I think the public sector could do more of to benefit. Is like in now I forget the latest stats, but I think the median time that people under 40, I guess, or like older millennials and below, like spend at any company is like 2.5 years or so. Is like and I do think that there is like real value in continuing to push yourself to be uncomfortable by, if you're in a position of leadership, by bringing in people with outside and orthogonal perspectives and truly like give them space for that diversity of thought to be incorporated, and also like for the government and private and public sector and nonprofits too, of like rethinking how they operate on a more regular basis by bringing in people from different backgrounds.
I couldn't agree more. It's and as someone in leadership, it's important to be to support that, right? To support that philosophy at work and make sure people feel safe. I want to take a moment. Just first of all, I didn't even get a chance. I wanted to say to folks listening, please drop a comment. Let us know where you're listening in from, and who you are, where you're from, etc. We've got just a couple of comments here. So we have Marianne saying, this was previously when you were talking about some of the previous work you did. She said, that's why you're boundless. There's little that's fixed, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. There are always problems to be solved. Shiv just said, wow, amazing. And then I think Marianne here just mentioned Amazon Go is such a wild concept. And so I want to get to your, time at Amazon just before you kind of launched or when it went off to launch Boundless. I know that, you obviously went to business school, you left that, you became, I guess, a product manager, right, at Amazon and sort of helped launch this Amazon Go product. Talked a little bit about it, of course. For folks who don't know about it, it's really a wild concept. I mean, absolutely. I've got my own opinions about it in terms of plastic use, because you obviously have to like containerize everything, but hopefully we'll get there where we can like bring a head of lettuce that's not packaged out and like the scanners will know exactly what it is too. Hopefully we'll get there. But I think the idea that, you could just walk out with something and it's being monitored is like crazy. I'm curious from your perspective. I mean, you obviously you went to business school, you got this like amazing job building, I mean, really tech that's still futuristic. I mean, that was a few years ago, but it's still now cutting edge of like retail tech. Can you just share a little bit about maybe something that you took away from the experience and specifically what during that time made you ultimately say, you know what, I want to go build something of my own finally?
There's a lot that I learned from my time at Amazon. I mean, there's and I think two things really stick out. So the first is, I think that they watched their neighbors across the lake in Seattle, Microsoft, get into I would call it an innovation sort of morass about 10 years back, right? Where like Microsoft was really struggling. They were still pumping out billions of dollars in cash with Office and Windows, but they built everything around those giant ecosystems so that like new things never happened. And it was very challenging to get things done. And Amazon, I think, adopted a different principle, which I really admire, which is that like they want people to build the best experiences for the job that you are trying to do, not worried about how it ties in with the rest of the Amazon ecosystem. Like with, and there's been so many times where like things could have been done more efficiently. That I've seen, sharing like common sort of core, either code or technology or hardware or everything like that. But instead, like the push is always do the best thing for us and our customers and our customer experience. And then like eventually over time we can like make things more systematic, we can like get scale, we can like make things more efficient, but just worry about creating the best experience for our use cases to start. And I think it's sort of that level of giving people the freedom to really make the best decisions in their own domain is an incredible amount of empowerment that actually continues the cycle of building, ever new and really interesting things. And if you think of all these like massive companies, like and what they've been able to deliver that's new over the last 10 years, like Amazon is well on the top of that list. Right? Apple is, building great products, but just cycling like products that they've already had. Microsoft has embraced the cloud now, and they're doing some really like great things now, but like it took them a long time. Facebook, Google, like their core areas are haven't meaningfully changed like how they operate. But Amazon's been able to try all these different things, right? From drones to airlines to phones to like physical stores to in-home like sort of Alexa stuff, like and not all of it works, but they have embedded even at like a 1 million person company, which is like just ridiculous to think about that they employ that many people. The opportunities for new things to continue to be born. And then, the second part that I think is incredible about Amazon is, there's a lot that you can criticize about their either their approach to climate, their approach to warehouse like workers, and some of the other areas the way that they operate. But they have 14, I believe, leadership principles. And which is way more sort of values or principles than any sort of management book or coach would recommend, right? Everyone says, oh, pick like 4 to 6, like things that really matter to you. They have 14, and everyone knows all of them. If you meet anyone who's been at Amazon for more than a year and you talk to them about their leadership principles, they will know them by heart. And like they people use them in like non-work conversations constantly, and it's just embedded into like how they approach everything that they do, from hiring to promotions to performance management to hard decisions to product launch. Everything is embedded in and can be framed in these leadership principles. And again, I'm not saying that these are the best leadership principles, and but what they've been able to do to instill it into these are our leadership principles, and this is what it means to be at our company, is something I'm still like looking to be able to do better at Boundless.
Yeah, that's powerful. I mean, it's building a community. It's building something that people feel like they're truly, truly a part of. They're like part of the sum is greater than the sum of the parts, or the whole rather is greater than the sum of the parts, is what I'm trying to say. So I suppose there's a little bit of that there. No, you're right. I mean, especially at that scale, it's insane. Because you have, like you said, so many people geographically spread out. I mean, of course, there are going to be differences, but how do you kind of maintain some level of consistency of the way people think and feel about their workplace? I mean, that sounds, so it would feel to me, if I didn't know the rest of your story, I would think you're going to keep innovating here. I mean, you have this freedom, you have a job that is giving you the freedom and the tools and the resources, and like the scale is insane of what you can potentially do at Amazon. And you were obviously, again, already working on something really exciting. Why Boundless then? Why leave that comfortable place, and where you're comfortable in your job, you could have discomfort day to day because you're trying new stuff, but like you're going to get a paycheck at the end of the day. You have health insurance, all that good stuff. So like, why Boundless? Like, what stood out for you? What really kind of pushed you to say, you know what, I got to go do this crazy, crazy thing, start totally from scratch and build something of my own?
Honestly, it's because I learned too much. It's interesting, like 4 years in now, like a lot of aspiring sort of entrepreneurs are now coming to me and asking for advice about like how to start a company and so forth. And, you keep trying to tell them this, so they won't believe it until they actually get there. Like, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. Like, this is like, so like, and I've given up and sacrificed, and I'm like worse at so many other aspects of my life because of this. And credit to my wife and her like endless patience and everything like that. So, but it is so hard, and the only reason you would do this is if there is a problem that you absolutely feel compelled to solve, and there is no better way to solve it. And so that's really stuck with me. Is that like the reason why I started Boundless is I asked the question why for the first time in late 2016 of why is immigration so hard? And I interviewed hundreds of families and immigration lawyers and government and policy folks. And I was like, wait a second, this is exactly like what technology and data can do to like transform the system, right? Like this is an information problem, it's a data problem. This is like I was like, I had to do something about it because so many millions of people were having subpar experiences, whether it's like they couldn't afford, legal help, and so were struggling to do it on their own, or they were getting taken advantage of by notarios and other like players in the industry. It was like there had to be something done, and it just blew my mind that in a world where you can do your taxes online, right? You can like invest and do whole like your retirement portfolios online. You can, file for like marriages and divorces online. You can like do all of these other aspects that are high, reasonably high stakes and important. And you can do like mortgages online, like all these other things you can figure out like doing through technology. Immigration was still so far behind the curve. And so thus it actually became a much easier choice once I got there, because that's all I could think about. Like I did nights and weekends on this project. I used up all my PTO to like work on this for like all my vacation days to like try to work on this. And it just felt like something that absolutely needed to be solved. And in the world where like you're often having to choose in life, right, between doing good and doing well, and this is a chance to be able to do both at the same time, and transform an industry that fundamentally hasn't changed in generations.
Practically speaking, it sounds like you started to work on this while you were still at Amazon on your time off, your weekends, your nights, etc. So were you doing these, like, were you interviewing people, kind of on your spare time, just asking them, because what I'm curious, I guess, is one specific thing, and then I want to get to where you are now with the company, because I want to be conscious of your time. Was there a moment where you had a conversation and someone mentioned something to you and it reminded you of this problem? Like, how did you actually stumble upon the problem? And I ask this because, this show fundamentally is for me 3 years ago, for me 4 years ago, when I knew there was something in my mind that I wanted to fix, but I had no one in the immigration industry to look to say, where should I look to find the solution for this thing that's, I think, bothering me, but I'm not sure where it is. So I'm curious sort of how you stumbled upon this idea that then sparked this, journey to eventually get to where you are now.
I mean, I as Wynn does, I think that there's always like an initial push, and then in my case, it's like I met someone who had spent over $10,000 on their immigration attorney for a marriage green card, and had a terrible experience through the entire thing. And it's just like, wow, this problem still exists 30 years after I came over the country. It's gotten more expensive, and people are still having a terrible experience. And so, sometimes when I talk about the founding story of Boundless, there's a part of you that feels a little ashamed of, like, there are people who have grown up since like age 5, saying that there is a big problem that they need to solve, and it's like been a part of their story the entire life. For me, this was never the case. I was just like every other immigrant, content with this really messed up status quo. Right? Like at the end, like we're like, okay, I guess this is just what it is. Like, it is what it is. Like, this is the rite of passage to being able to come to America and become American, and like, and so you meet other people and you just like share who had the worst story, and it turns into an oppression Olympics, and then someone gets free drinks because they had an even more absurd situation than you, and like. And I just, yeah, like I took it as given. And then one day, I was talking to an incubator, Pioneer Square Labs, who ended up, where we were incubated and came out of. I was talking to them about different ideas, and we got on the topic of immigration, and it's just like, wait, why is this still a problem, right? And then, yeah, once you start opening the door to that rabbit hole, it just keeps going deeper and deeper, and you're like, okay, this needs to be solved. So let's do it.
So explain to me then, and everybody listening, what does Boundless do and how does it work?
Yeah, so we are basically helping families across all our walks of life be able to understand how the immigration process works, right? With guides, with resources, with all these reports around how systems working, and trying to shine the transparent light into what has always been sort of a black box, that is Department of Homeland Security, or USCIS. And then we have a technology platform that helps families be able to successfully complete their immigration applications, whether it's for fiance visa, marriage green card, parents green card, children green card, travel, removal conditions. There's like all these different, like EADs, et cetera. There's like all these different categories it can do. But the idea is that, hey, we can help you know what to do and know how to complete them. And then as part of our package, we also have a network of independent immigration attorneys that will be essentially your attorney for this period of time during the application, and be able to answer questions that you have, as well as review the application for completeness. So the idea is that, can we give you that level of comfort and support while working with you to do a lot of it yourself, and giving you the tools and technology to make it as easy as possible, so that you can complete your immigration application on your own time, at your own pace, with a level of confidence that you weren't able to have previously, and have it be, have that, again, that level of confidence that it'll be done correctly at a cost that is, let's call it like a third to a fifth of what traditional immigration attorneys charge.
And I know that you and I have talked about this previously, and there's so much conversation that happens around the immigration tech space, and I'm curious just to hear. I mean, I know your thoughts on this, but maybe just to mention it, out loud. I think I know your thoughts on this. There's discussion within the immigration bar always that like tech is taking over our jobs, right? I mean, this always comes up. I'm always trying to say it's not. Tech is here to support the immigration lawyer. It's here to automate the part that's administrative. The human side, which is it's probably the most important part, or one of the most important parts of this process, forget about other fields of law, is still there. And really, the idea behind tech is to enable the lawyer to not feel the need to cut a conversation short because they need to get back to like filling out forms. With you, it's a little bit different, but I think because in your case, you're helping people with fairly straightforward cases, right? I mean, if they have a complex case, you're probably gonna, right? You like flag it and you say like, you should go talk to a lawyer from step one. But if people have a pretty straightforward case, they enter their data, they enter their documents, their case is reviewed by an immigration lawyer, and then I guess they can talk to them if needed. Like, what are your thoughts on where Boundless sits vis-a-vis the immigration law, space?
I mean, I think that, look, I deeply respect the amazing work that immigration lawyers do on behalf of families. I would say that if you were to ask most immigration attorneys, especially ones that are solos or small operations, what percentage of your time are you actually spending doing the things that only you can do? Right? The percentage is going to be relatively low, because there's so much that's involved in like trying to run a small business, trying to find clients, trying to like fill out like specific forms that don't require like legal knowledge, trying to like, fix the copier, trying to do all of these like, set up the internet, all of these aspects of like of your job that's not related to why you went into this field to begin with, right? No one goes in the immigration attorney so that they can, run a small business, right? You go into this to try to help people. And so this is why I give talks in front of ALA every year around actually we are augmenting that model, right? For us, for our network of immigration attorneys, they're able to spend all of their time with us on directly helping clients, right? Reviewing applications, answering questions, and if there's more complex cases, they can take those on as full on situations and cases, and and they can do it on their own time. So that they've actually gotten a lot more flexibility in their own private practice to take on only the clients they want to, because they can supplement it with a very stable and secure income from Boundless. And it's also given people flexibility for the first time. We have attorneys that live outside of the country. I imagine before, it'd be very hard for you to have a U.S. barred immigration attorney specializing in U.S. family immigration, but live in other countries. And we've also allowed people to work from home, work on any hour of the day. So people have been able to go take care of their family. Right? People have been able to, especially people can have young kids and need to work around that schedule. People have had to take care of their parents and work around that schedule. We've finally given people immigration attorneys the level of flexibility that sort of other knowledge workers have been able to achieve, and that's by freeing them up from the rigor and grind of running a brick and mortar small business.
Yeah.
So while there's always going to be spots for immigration attorneys to do all these across the entire spectrum of different types of applications, and I deeply respect their level of expertise and knowledge and capabilities. What we're trying to do with technology is allow them to just do the things that they spent all of this time and energy and they want to do.
Yeah. No, I mean, I totally agree with that. Whether it's Boundless or other technologies that are supporting immigration lawyers, and this is just some lawyers they do want to run their own business and they do want to fix the printer. Maybe they love and that's great. They can do that. But I think the point here, and this is what I get out of it, is that you're creating an opportunity for people to have an option to not have to deal with that. If they hate doing that stuff and all they want to do is review and talk to and do the legal analysis, this is a way for them. And of course, the trickle down benefit also goes to ultimately the immigrant who's paying less and maybe having this tech forward experience, et cetera. I know we have 2 minutes or 1 minute left. Crap. Can I get you for 5 extra minutes, do you think?
Sure.
Or are you, I know I put you on the spot there for a moment.
Yeah, happy to answer a couple more questions.
I wanted to ask one question about we have some questions coming in here. One question about from Chase Hertel, who is a big immigration tech and legal tech professional thinker. Would love to hear your thoughts on regulatory reform and if you see a future for Boundless in these efforts. I mean, do you guys are seeing high volume of cases? You have reports. I mean, you're seeing trends. Is there any way that you can get involved, or is there anything that you're seeing from the regulatory reform perspective, especially with Biden?
Yeah. So I think there's two parts to this question. So one is on the actual immigration policy side, of which we want to continue to provide more data and information, help guide the right policies. We led a whole movement with over 100 major companies around the country, such as Microsoft and Twitter and Levi Strauss, around against the public charge rule as something that's bad for the U.S. economy. So there's things that we're definitely doing on the policy side, and then on the regulatory, so legal ethics and regulatory reform part. I think we are naturally going to be in a position where we want people to have more options and we want to have people have more choice. Like the previous president of the Washington State Bar Association, Paula Littlewood, fortunately passed away recently, but she had this great analogy of like law support of like you're going into a vertical mall, right? And there are multiple floors to this mall. And then previously you had two choices, right? You would go into this mall, you can either stay on the first floor of like just perusing forums and websites and blogs and trying to figure yourself, or you have to go all the way to the top floor and do a full service immigration attorney. And like there are a lot of people in the middle who get shut out of access to legal services and access to justice. And the more options and the more choice that people can have across the multiple floors of this mall, the better it is for families. And so, I strongly believe in that, and I'm encouraged by some of the experiments that Utah is running. I'm encouraged by like what other countries have been able to do, and fundamentally it's about like I think everyone agrees that like, hey, we want to protect clients, right? And we want to help clients like have their rights taken care of and defended and approach the right way. And I think that part of that has to be like we want to help as many people as we can have access to the support that they need.
So my last question, sort of piggybacking off of that a little bit, we didn't get a chance to talk in detail about this, but you guys have successfully raised a bunch of VC money. This is something that is, pretty rare still. I think it's becoming more frequent in the immigration tech space, but, generally speaking, immigration wasn't, I think, just in the VC world, but I think it's picking up more. And, recently, obviously, you guys actually raised a round and you acquired essentially one of your competitors or partners now, right? RapidVisa, who was basically, they were around for a while. They were doing a similar type of thing. They were helping folks come in on their green cards, et cetera. Can you just talk a little bit about maybe what do you see for the future? I mean, obviously disclose whatever you can, but, just what do you see maybe from a vision perspective for Boundless? Where are you going to continue to raise money? Do you want to do more in terms of immigration? Where do you see the company going with all what you've done?
I mean, raising money is just a means, right? It's like, and what it's indicative of is that like we want to create a very like large and comprehensive and successful company. Because what happens is like the investors are expecting, us not to be a fine medium-sized company, but to be a large like first positive brand default choice in the industry kind of like scale. And so the areas that like I get really excited about are one, is like more categories and more types of products, so that like if you want to, again, for all the ones that can be streamlined with technology, let's be able to help help families and and everyone who needs that like assistance through that. And there's a lot of places like both in the US and if you think of it globally, right? At the end of the day, immigration law is like across every country. It's like taking the same subset of information and just like there's new rules, new forms, new languages. And so if there's no reason why like it needs to be constrained to just, a single country. And so that's like I get excited about being able to help more and more people in different ways. And then also like how can we help? How can we help people like live better lives once they're here? And how can we help people? Be able to achieve their dream of whatever it is that they want once they're through with this like government process. So like there's definitely a lot more to come, and I am really excited for what each round means is that we can invest more in more people, into more technology, into better products and better experiences, with the ultimate goal of like, how can we help meaningfully improve the lives of millions of families every year.
I love that. It's super exciting, and it brings up the really important point of the fact that just the visa process is not the whole immigration process. there's a lot that happens before the visa is granted, and there's a lot that happens afterwards. Acclimation, finding a place to live, like getting used to your home, your new home. And I totally agree with you that this whole, this global mobility space, right, of which immigration is a really important part, but still a part. There's a lot of opportunity for automation there. So I love to hear that, because I think the future, is bright for the movement of people around the world. And, companies like Boundless will hopefully help people do that more easily. So
definitely, I'm excited for that world too.
Yeah. Well, Xiao, I know you took a couple more minutes than you expected. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. This was really exciting. We probably could have gone on for another hour, but alas, there is work to be done. So I appreciate you joining and sharing your experience and your wisdom. And, just excited to see what Boundless continues to do in the coming days, months, and years.
Thanks, Roman.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. I love that conversation. Just everything from strategy and business tips and mindset tricks to like genuinely what's coming and what is here and what is really changing in the immigration industry, and how we should be thinking about service delivery with tech as well. I just love the conversation. Hope to continue with it. Thank you all so much for joining. Have a great weekend. See you here next week, and peace out.